Welcome back to our third and final section of our UI UX design with Figma series, and we can just jump right in. I think you know the drill by this point. So as a reminder, this is the last one. We went through design basics 2 weeks ago. We did more of those intermediate stuff last week, and then today we're going to make it kind of come to life, animating and prototyping some interactions. For those who are asking for like mobile app examples, that's what we're doing today. We've been primarily focused on some website ones the past 2 weeks, and today we're going to do with a mobile app thing that I put together real quickly. And there's one kind of weird thing with this. I am going to show you how to prototype like a hover animation, which does not exist in mobile apps. You can't like hover over a button, but it's more for websites, but I do want to show you how to do it because it's pretty common on the websites. Cool. So yeah, we have a new starting file for this week. It is the same link as last week, but instead of 2 at the end, it's 3. And I also put that on the whiteboard. Cool. I am going to put this up because I keep forgetting to show it at the end of the workshop, so I'm just going to do it now. If you have any feedback that you want to share with me about your experience for the last 3 weeks, please fill this out. It is completely anonymous, so be as honest and candid as possible, and really helps me make sure that this event goes smoothly every semester that we do it, and then also we can apply that to the other things that we do as well. Cool. Now, if you go to that link, that bit.ly/s25 Figma 3, you'll see this, and just as a reminder, you just click this open in Figma button. And so you should see something that looks like this. So it looks like a lot more than what we've done before. There's really only, I think, 2 things that are slightly different from, we haven't really talked about them yet. The first one is these sections, right? So I have assets and components, I have playground, I have design. These are just done through this tool underneath the frame one, this section. And this is just basically a way to group it on the canvas. So I grouped all of our kind of assets and components that we're going to be working with in one, the kind of final design down here, and then this like playground area where we're going to play around with some animation stuff first here. The second thing is in this design part itself, there's this kind of funky thing that I've set up for us, where if you click and drag and move over, I've put a number of these kind of menu items that are on the frame, but outside of the frame bounds. So basically, if I go over to my layers panel, as I've highlighted these all, under menu, you'll see that there's a bunch of these selected, even though they're off of our like canvas area. This is going to be how we're going to prototype that kind of like scrolling animation. So like we're going to make it scroll so that if we like kind of move our finger like so, then we can kind of see those ones as we're doing. Okay, cool. The other thing that might be slightly different from what you see, I have a start section. You probably just have that. I just duplicated that into a workshop one just so we can kind of see where we started and where we ended. Cool. All right. Any questions so far? No? Awesome. So let's I'm going to put down the space bar on my keyboard and just click and drag to move over to our playground section. And this is going to be where we start to do our animation. So animating and prototyping in Figma, there's really 2 ways that you can do it. The first one is going to be in between frames. So an example would be you click the home button and it takes you to the home screen frame. You click the location button, it takes you to the locations page. So that's just between these different frames that we've set up. The other one is going to be switching between component variants. So remember last week we went over components, and I have a bunch of them up here that all have like these different variants, for example. So one that we can see is under, it's pretty small, but this select payment button that I made for like a payment processing part in your cart. I have one that's the default where it's like not selected. And then I have a variant that has like a kind of fake card number in there. And so we can animate between and kind of prototype this interaction where you click on here and it kind of switches to that other one to emulate that you filled out something. basically. Cool. So let's go to our playground section, and I am going to zoom in just so we can see this better. Okay. So I have a couple different frames for us. I have 2 start ones and 2 end ones. We're probably just going to stick with these top ones, but if you want to use the other ones to play around with some other stuff, feel free to go and do that. So we're going to start off in our animation start frame and create a circle. So again, that's going under your shape tools with this ellipse, or that's going to be your O key on your keyboard, and just place that somewhere on your animation start. So I just clicked to make a perfect 100 by 100 circle. I'm going to place it at the top near the middle. And then for the fill, I'm going to change it to this like primary green color, let's say. You can choose whatever color, you can place it wherever you want. You can do whatever size you want. We're going to kind of emulate this circle changing. Now, hold down Alt or Option on your keyboard and click and drag to move it and create a duplicate to be on the other frame. So on our animation end frame. Now here you can make whatever changes you want to. I am going to use mine to move it to like more of the bottom. I'm going to scale it up so it's a bigger circle, and I'm going to change the color from primary to like accent. So just make your 2 circles different so that you can kind of see those changes as they're animated. We're just going to use these basic ones to learn kind of the fundamentals, and then we'll see it in the actual design stuff. Okay, so now we've done almost everything here in this design tab, and we finally get to move over to our prototype tab. So if you move over to the prototype tab and you have nothing selected, it's going to give you these prototype settings. And this is just setting up when you hit that present button. You can also do this down arrow right by your prototype view and go to preview. And that's what we're going to be using a lot, because you can do it right within Figma itself instead of having to, it jumps to this one for some reason. Instead of doing present, it kind of creates this whole new tab. And this is more for like seeing the final product. Okay. Now in prototype, if you hover over any of these different layers or this frame, or you click on animation start, for example, you'll notice that there's these little plus circles on the top, left, bottom, and right. I'm going to click on my circle that I made on my animation start, and I can see that I have those as well across the frame. And this is where you start that connection between where you want your animation to start and where you want it to end up. So with your circle selected, on this right part, click and drag from the plus and add this arrow to point to your animation end frame. So you just got to click and drag and move it till it's on that frame. And then when you release, it should look something like that. And we get our interaction settings up here. So we start off with what is called a trigger. This is basically just like, what's that instigating action for your animation to start? So this first one is on tap. So that's going to be your like kind of clicking on something, that's what we're going to be doing a lot with this one. But there's a bunch of other ones as well. So there's on drag. So if you were dragging something, there's while hovering. So if you want something to happen when you hover over something, while pressing, if you want it to only happen when you're pressing down on it. The key or gamepad is if you're going to want them to press a specific key or something on the keyboard, or if you have like a controller or something. There's some ones about when your mouse enters or when your mouse leaves, when you're touching up or down. And then there's also this after delay, this is where we're going to do some more automatic stuff. So you don't have to click on something to have the animation start. It just happens after a certain amount of time. Okay. We'll get practice with a couple of these. Yes. This interaction one, you have to add the interaction in the prototype tab. You hover over or select the circle, and then you click and drag to add this connector from the side to where you want it to end up. Yep, you're welcome. It might also be easier if you want to select your circle, and then over here there's interactions. You can also just click plus over here. But then you do have to like kind of configure, I want to navigate to my animation end frame, and then it adds like that. Okay, so now we're going to keep this all just basic right now, and I'm going to exit out of here. And you'll notice it created what is called a flow for me. Basically, flows are going to be your series of steps of interactions or stuff that you're doing in the prototype. Sometimes you might want to do a flow that's the entire app, right? It's like you're opening it from the home screen to you're logging in, to you're placing something in the cart, to you're checking out, to you're getting your order confirmation, etc. If you have a much bigger product and you want to do like specific testing on stuff with users, you can also create smaller flows that only go through like the payment processing workflow or the adding something to the cart and removing it or something like that. So now by your flow one, if you want to click this button right here, this kind of brings up our kind of preview. You should see this little thing right here. You can also click on the animation start frame and then over by the share, go under the present and click preview. And so now we added our interaction to our circle that when we click it, it's going to go to the next frame. So if I click it, it switches to my other frame, right? Now, if I try to click the other circle, it doesn't do anything going back. So your challenge is to add that same basic interaction where if you click this bigger circle, it switches you back to that animation start frame. All right, so hopefully that was pretty easy. So you just click on in prototype tab, you click on your bigger circle, you can click and drag to move over to the frame. And then I still have it just on tap. I'm not changing any of my settings here. And then now when I preview my flow one, I can click back and forth between these. Cool. So now if you need to edit any of these, you can just kind of click and drag and highlight over it, or you can just click directly on that arrow and that interaction tab will pop back up for that animation. We'll go through some of this like kind of action stuff later on, but I want to focus in on this animation one down here because this is the kind of start of seeing it a little bit better. So if I go back here into my preview and I'm clicking between these, it's very basic and not that dynamic. It's just an instant, like click somewhere, it's immediately at the other place kind of thing. So maybe you want there to be a little bit more kind of like flavor to it. And this is where you do it in this animation section. So if you open it up, you have a couple different options for what sort of animation you want to see in this transition. So our instant is that kind of instant switch from one thing to the next. Dissolve, if you click on this, and we'll go through these other things later, I'm going to change this duration to just 3s. It's based in milliseconds, but if you just put s at the end of a number, that's like the total number of seconds. So I'm going to make this really long just so we can kind of see what dissolve looks like. Click back out, go to my preview, and you'll notice that it has this kind of more gradual transition between the two frames. Okay, going back to our animation settings in our interaction, there's also Smart Animate. And we'll play around with this one a little bit. This one's really cool. This basically takes a look at your starting frame and takes a look at your ending frame. And it looks at what is different between the two. And it's going to kind of add a bunch of dynamic changes between them. Now, if I click Smart Animate, I just want to show you what this looks like. And I go back to preview. The only thing different between my two frames is going to be this circle, right? So I have circle. This is my ellipse 13. It's also called ellipse 13 on the other side, but it's a different circle, right? It's a different color. It's in a different position. It's in a different shape. And so when I click on here with Smart Animate, it's going to kind of gradually move just what is different, right? The header and the kind of nav bar down here are exactly the same from frame to frame, so it doesn't animate anything between them. Cool. All right. So going back so we can look at the other ones. The ones after this kind of divider are more kind of transition based. So move in and move out are just kind of moving the frames, and then you can decide which direction they want to go. So if I do move in, and let's say from the right or moving to the right over here, you can see this little preview of what's going to happen, right? So this gray one is going to be our new frame, and it's going to move in, and we can see that right here. Now, it looks weird because we have a header that should stay the same, and we have a navigation menu that stays the same. But when I do this, it animates the whole frame. So if you're going to use any of these move in, move out ones, and you want some things to stay the same, you click on this animate matching layers checkbox. And then now what it's going to do is it's going to keep your things that are consistent from frame to frame the same. So our navigation menu and our header. So it doesn't actually use that move. But you'll notice, what does this look like? We already played around with a different animation one. Yes. So when you're using move in, move out, etc., and you click animate matching layers, it's going to look at what is the same between these. And because these are named the same, so ellipse 13 and ellipse 13 for me, it's going to think this is the same layer. So I need to animate between them. If you want it to be, no, I actually just want the circles to be moving in that transition, and that's why I picked it. You just have to rename one of these. So if I change this to, new circle, for example, and I go back, it's now going to just move in my circle. So if you have both of the circles in animation start and end with the same name, and you use a move in, move out transition with animate matching layers on, it's just going to be a smart animate. If you want to get rid of that and actually see that moving in or moving out, you just rename one of them. So these are moving in or moving out. This is for the new frame. What is it going to happen with it? There's also the push. This is going to be better for like if you want, instead of not seeing the new frame. So like, for example, right now with the moving in, I can see that old frame is still there until the very end of my animation. If I wanted to start its way out at the same time, I can change that to push, for example. And then our new frame is literally just going to push out our old frame instead of it being just moving on top of one another or vice versa. The last ones here are our slide in and slide out right here. These are the same as your moving in and your moving out. The only thing that it does is it adds a dissolve to it as well. So if I were to do slide in, for example, and I do this, it does kind of get pushed, but it dissolves out as well. Whereas if I just did our move in, this one isn't dissolving. It's not really moving. So let's just do some basic thing in our actual design. So I'm going to move over here, and you'll notice that I have a couple of screens where I stole this from the iOS design kit in the Figma community. So if you want to create your own iOS home screen, just look that up. And I created this little app badge for us, and I want it to be where if you click on this, that it brings us over to our app loading screen. It's super simple. You just click in, you might have to click in a few times until you have app badge selected. Under iOS home screen, it's this app badge. And then now I'm just going to click and drag to move it over to our new frame. And then we have our on tap. We're going to navigate to, and our destination is going to be this screen. For animation, what do you think that we should do? Instant could work. So if we click instant, let's see how that looks. Some of the images take a while to load. So it goes like that, and it's like immediately open. Does that happen in real life? Ideally, but ideally, yes. Most likely, no. So we would probably want to do something like, let's try dissolve. Right now it's at 3 seconds, but we also don't want to give off the implication that our app is going to take a long time to load. So let's just bring it back down to like 300 milliseconds. So 300 ms. And then now if I go back here and I click, it's a little bit more realistic. So now while we're still over here, let's do the next part of this. So we have it where we start with our flow. You click on the badge, it's going to bring up our app, but then you're kind of stuck here. We didn't go through it officially, but I did mention it really briefly. What type of animation do you think we should do between our loading screen and this kind of login register screen? So far, we've been doing on tap. So you have to click something for it to work. Yes. Let's do after delay. So if I am in prototype and I'm hovering over my app loading screen, I don't want it to be from the button. I'm gonna have it be from the frame. So I'm just gonna click and drag to move it over here. And then now that trigger, we're gonna switch to after delay. And then this just allows us to say, okay, how much of a delay do we want it to be? So once it gets to the screen, how long should it take to start this next animation? We'll just leave it at 800 milliseconds for now. Then the action is we're navigating to our next frame. The destination's this. What animation do you think we should do? Move in. Okay, that could work. Yeah, let's see how that looks. So let's do move in and let's move it from up and let's see how that looks. So if we go all the way back to our flow 2, let me click here and we do this. Look pretty good. So let's just do that again. Yeah, that one works pretty good. Also, what you could do, I'll show you a different one. Let's try smart animate. Because remember, this is going to look at what is matching between the other ones and then change their position. And so if I go click here after my delay, it looks pretty similar. But the thing is that our buttons didn't move in. They just kind of appeared. So it's kind of dependent on what you want to see from your animation. What I would encourage is if there's like apps that you like using or like websites and you're playing around with their interactions, try to guess how you would simulate that in Figma. So let's go through our next part here where we're on our account access section screen and we have login, register, and continue as guest. Now, for continue as guest, typically, because I have 3 different situations that are going to happen, right? We're going to have someone who logs in who already has an account. We're going to have someone who's registering for account for the first time. And then there's going to be someone who bypasses this and just kind of continues. They're not going to save their stuff. Typically, I don't have one, but if you're going to have like a guest and a login one, you should have a homepage user screen, one that kind of says, this one says someone's name. So this is going to be our login and our register one. Continue as guest, I should probably just say like hello instead of like putting in a name, just in case if someone does click continue as guest, we don't want to misname them kind of just because we didn't create a different screen. So for continue as guest, I would probably have a different frame that just says hello or something without the name at the top, but we're not going to be worried about that for right now. So if we go up to our assets and components, you'll notice somewhere in here, I've created a login overlay and a register overlay. So what these are is these are different frames that I want to kind of appear in front of our frame that we click login on, right? So I don't want this to be like the only thing you see on the screen, because if I go and I preview this, I didn't design it with these dimensions in mind. So I have these kind of blank spaces, right? Now, what I can do is let's say we do login. So click on your login button. Now over here, this is where we're going to just add our interaction up here. So instead of trying to click and drag over there, we're going to just click on interactions, that plus button. So it's going to be an on tap as our trigger. As we click this button, we want something to happen. And so far with actions, we've used this navigate to, and this just navigates to a different frame. But down over here, we have the option to use overlays instead. So if I click open overlay, it's going to ask me, what do I want to overlay on top of this frame when we click this button? And you'll notice that we have all of our sections, we have all of our frames listed here. So I just need to find our login overlay. So as I click that, I get some more options for what I want it to be with my overlay. The position is going to be where in relation to the frame do we want this overlay to be? So do we want it to be centered on our phone? Do we want it to be in the top left, in the top center, the top right? Most things you'll do centered. You know, maybe if you want to simulate like an alert message or a warning message, you might do like top center. But for ours, we can just leave it at centered. You can also click manual. This is pretty cool, where it will show your overlay. and then you can kind of click and drag to move it to be exactly where you want it to be. So that's if you put manual right here and under position. I'm just going to put centered just to make sure that it's perfectly centered. And now we have these two options right here. So one is going to be close when clicking outside. So this is if someone clicks outside of our overlay, should that close our overlay, right? I've designed it so that there's an X button up there. I typically also leave this as marked because most apps, if you like click outside of something, it kind of shoos it away. But you can also unclick this, and then you have to have some manual closing of the overlay. And then there's also, do you want it to have any sort of a background behind it? So we're just going to leave this as is right now so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to go back to my Flow 2 and preview it so that we can see the whole thing in its glory so far. So I'm going to click on our app badge. We have our delay, we go in, and then now as I click login, it's going to pop up with my overlay here. So now I do have it where it's, if I click outside of my overlay, so up here, for example, it closes it. And you'll also notice that it kind of dims the background a little bit when it's open. And that's that background that we set up over here. So if I go back to here where it says background, it's this kind of like 25% opaque, 75% transparent black background. It just dims the background a little bit so that you can focus on your overlay there. And then we have the same animation stuff that we can do here. The only thing with overlays is that there's going to be some restrictions as to what just doesn't work, is not going to either work or look good. So Figma just says, nope, you don't get to do it. So you can either do an instant one where it just immediately pops up. You can do a dissolve so that it kind of like fades in to that overlay, or you can also move the overlay in from somewhere. So let's just do move in. I'm going to move it in from the bottom. This might not look the most realistic. Maybe we'll do something like a dissolve. I just want to kind of play around so that you can see what this looks like. So go back here to my preview. I do this, and now when I click log in, it's going to move my overlay down from the bottom. Again, not the most realistic there. So I'll just switch that back to, let's say, dissolve. Yes. So if you have, let's say, I'll do register so that we can see. So if you click on the button, you open the interaction, you'll do your trigger as on tap. Your action should be open overlay. Then in the overlay, you have to select login overlay for that login button, or I'll do register overlay. And then these other ones should pop up. So now we have our login overlay set up. I'll just go and delete the register one for now. So we have our login overlay set up right up here. Now we want to use this X button to also close it. And so if I click on it, I can see that I can add my interaction here. So I will add, for action, I'll just hit close overlay. So I clicked on my X button in my login overlay up in my assets and components section. I clicked on the plus over by my interactions, and then on tap, my action is going to be closing my overlay. So now I can go here, I can click, I see my delay, I click log in, and then now I can click my X button to get rid of that overlay. Let's go back to our playground over here, because I want to talk about a little bit more of these animation settings, and so that we can see some more kind of cool animations. So with our start circle going to our ending circle frame, let's do smart animation. And as a reminder, we'll just see what that looks like. Or you click it and it just kind of animates into there, and it is really slow. So I'm going to move this back to like a second. Okay. And the reason that it's not actually smart animating is we renamed it. So I'm going to rename it back to ellipse 13. And then that's actually going to give us that smart animate thing. Okay. So now if you go back to this interaction, under animation, you will see that we have this curve option. And if you open it up, there is a ton of things. So we have our linear, which is going to be that the speed of everything in our animation is the same at all times. So if I click linear and I have 1000 milliseconds or 1 second for my animation, for this entire second, it is going to be the same speed for my animation at all times. Okay. Then we have this section that these are these kind of Bezier things that you can change the speed for. So ease in, for example, means that your animation is going to be slightly slower at the beginning, and then it's going to slowly speed up. So if I click ease in, it might be a little hard to tell, but it's a little bit slow at the beginning, and then it goes faster, right? So a little slow, and then it kind of goes a little bit more in. So easing in means that you're kind of just easing into the speed of the animation, starting slower, ending a little bit faster. Ease out is the same exact thing in reverse. So you're starting off a little bit faster, and then you're slowing down as you get to your destination. Ease in and out is a melding of the two. So you start off a little slower, you get faster, and then you get slower again. Ease in back, ease out back, and ease in and out back are just kind of funky. I almost never use them. You can play around with them if you want to learn what they look like. So I want you to select linear now, and then reopen that curve setting. So I have linear, and then click on this custom Bezier. When you click there, you will get this chart. And this chart is basically that representation of what linear speed looks like for this animation. Speed in these Bezier curves is dependent on the slope of this line at times. I know I keep throwing math at you. It's just what's behind it. So because this is a straight line going from our start to our end, that means that it's the same speed at all times. If I were to switch this, let's say, to ease in, and then go back to custom Bezier, I can see that change in speed now in my graph. And again, it's the slope. And so because this is a little bit more flatter right here, it means it's slower. And then as it kind of ramps up, there's more slope there and it gets faster. What's really nice is if you go like linear and then custom Bezier again, you can edit this. So you're not locked into those presets. And so if you click, let's say on this top right one, and you start to drag it, you can start to edit your own speed curve, right? So if those presets aren't doing exactly what you want it to be, you can create your own kind of custom thing here. And the reason I made that joke of ease in and out back or kind of just weird is if you look at their curves, they're doing all sorts of funky things. So ease out back, for example, is like that. All right. So let's do ease in and out. That's a pretty standard kind of preset for animation. So let's go to back to our playground interaction. Under curve, there is a few more down here. And these are our spring presets, and then we can do a custom spring. These get a little funky, if I'm honest. It's basically instead of these kind of geometry math for stuff, this is like physics. Okay. So if I were to do like custom spring, for example, you will see this different chart right here. And there's stiffness, there's damping, and there's mass. So stiffness is just basically how physically stiff or loose your motion is going to look. The damping is going to be how much friction there is in the motion. So basically, does it slow down ever, right? If there's more friction, then it starts to slow down. If there's no friction on the movement at all, it just keeps going forever and ever and ever and ever. And then mass is just like, does this object have weight? So does it feel kind of heavy? So if we were like making this kind of fall, does it feel like that? With these spring ones, I recommend just kind of playing around with these presets for a while. For example, you could do bouncy, and you'll see a little animation of what that's going to look like. And if I go back here and I click here, it kind of looks like it bounces, right? So I would start there. And then if there's like something specific you want to do, I would just then go to custom spring, and you can see this chart right here of how that bouncy preset looks like. I maybe want it to not be so loose because it kind of like went over our screen and stuff. So maybe I want to increase the stiffness. Let's say let's double that to 1200. And then now it kind of feels a little bit more stiff than it did before. Most of the time, you're going to use an ease in or an ease out or linear or something like that. There is two more settings that you have in here that are hidden under state. I'm just going to describe these. We're not going to actually put these into practice, but reset scroll position. So if you want to, let's say, move to a screen, you want them to scroll down for a little bit, and then you're going to prototype that they leave that screen and then they come back to it. This is just like if they scrolled, do they get to, when they go back to that screen later, is it at the same part that they scrolled to before, right? So I open up a certain screen, I scroll somewhere, I go somewhere else, and I come back. Should I be where I was scrolled to before, or should I be back at the top, right? By default, you are going to be where you scrolled to before, but if you click this reset scroll position, when you go back to that screen, you'll be at the top again. Okay. There's also reset component state. So this is again more in line with those variants and stuff like that. If you were to have, let's say, a screen that has checkboxes, like maybe you have like a grocery list app and you like put in all your groceries and you just want to check that you like pick them up from the shelves or the aisle. If you like go back to a screen, like leave it and then come back to your list, are those still checked or not, right? By default, they are. If you want them to be when you move out and you come back in and they're gone, then you use this reset component state. Okay, cool. So now let's go through and start kind of finishing out our design and our prototype. So far we have our login, right? And let's see where we left off. So we click on our app badge, it brings up our loading screen. We get to our account access, we click login, we get here. Clicking submit doesn't do anything. You'll notice if I do click this, it looks like I forgot to remove this prototype interaction. But if you click these, it does switch your component variants. So let me show you what that looks like. So up here in our components, we have this enter your username, enter your password, stuff like that. So if you go here, you move it to this variant, you'll notice that instead of navigate to, we have change to, right? So basically what this is this is a big component that has our default. It's just like a descriptive text placeholder. I have a variant that is our username for an existing user that is unfilled. And so if you click on this, for example, I want you to change to our filled in one. And this is kind of like how you can simulate maybe some of those things where you don't have to expect users to type in stuff, right? Because this is just for testing. So down here in the bottom of our assets and components, you'll notice that I do have a component for our home button. I have a component for our location button, and so on and so forth. There we go. So down here, underneath by the select payment button, we have our 4 icons that are for our navigation bar, right? So now if I, in the prototype tab, if I click on the home button and I zoom out, I want when a user clicks on home for it to move to our home page. And so just like we've done before, we can do interactions on tap, navigate to home page for user, right? So I clicked on the home button up here, not down in my screen, but up here, and it added an interaction. I'll show you why we want to do that. But so up in this assets and components section, find your home button, click on it, click over here in the add the interaction tab, we navigate to our home. Now, if you click down here, for example, if you click over here to this next screen on locations, the home button has that interaction. Click over here, that home button has the same interaction. And the reason why that is because up here is the main component. So as we design the icons Remember when we went up here and clicked that diamond to create a component last week? I can go through it very quickly with you again. So if we go and let's say we create a circle up here, we have this ellipse, and we can click create component, and then that creates a reusable component that we can find over here in our assets. And then we can just click and drag to move it and create all of these instances. And then if we were to change this color, it changes across all of the instances. Is it ringing a bell from last week? Cool. That same idea of our component main one, changing it impacts those instances, works with prototyping as well. And so I have this home component, the main one, and I put it all over our design in all of these home menus or these navigation bar menus. So when I prototype from my main component, it impacts every instance that I haven't unlinked. So now that's why you want to use those components, because then you can prototype the thing once and then it impacts everything on your design and you don't have to keep replicating your workflows. So with the prototype tab selected, I'm going to click on or hover over my location one and just click and drag and move it to locations. You can choose which animation you want to do. I'm going to actually change mine to dissolve for these. So I'm going to go into my menu and do the same thing. And then I have my cart over here. So once you do it from these main components up here, if you were to select any of these navigation menus, they should all be prototyped to now move in between these different screens. So if I click on homepage user up here, and then I use my preview, so I clicked on the name, and then I click preview, I should now, I'll show you how to fix that. I should now be able to click on all of these buttons once I scroll down, and I'll be taken to the correct screen. Cool. So now you might notice that on the home screen, my navigation menu is way at the bottom and you can't see it at the very top of our screen. The coffee one though, the menu stays there. So to do that, what you need to do is select your navigation bar on the home screen. Under prototype, where it says scroll behavior, we'll change the position. So scroll with parent just means like, is it in the flow of scrolling? So in this case, it's at the way bottom. We have to scroll to get to it. We can also change it to fixed. And basically what this means is that it's going to be fixed to the place that it's at. And if I were to do that, and you'll notice that the menu one already has that for all of these. Now, when I go over here and preview, my menu bar will always stay at the very bottom of my screen, no matter where I go to or how I scroll. Now, if you click on menu, and you do preview, you'll notice that thing that I was kind of talking about at the very beginning, where we have all of our menu items and they spill over and you can't get to them. I'm clicking and I'm dragging and I just can't get to where I can see those other menu items. So let's work on that. So if you go actually back to the design tab instead of prototype and go into this menu section, kind of find these here. And as a reminder, we do have a bunch of these hidden ones, right? So I'm going to click over somewhere to the left of my hot drinks list, click and drag until I select them all. There should be 6. And then what I'm going to do is use our auto layout frame from last week. So under layout, there's this kind of weird button that as you hover over it, it says auto layout. You click on it and it creates this new frame for us with our content. You'll want to make sure that clip content is turned on. So basically what this means is that if there's any content that is outside of your frame, it doesn't get shown. So for an example, if I click on menu up here, clip content is turned on. So all of these menu items I don't see. Even though they're within my frame over here, I don't see them because they're not on top of these frame widths. If I were to unclick that, I would see everything. And this is for our menu frame, okay? So go back to our auto layout frame that we created for our hot drinks. We have clip content turned on. And then now using the kind of dragging our right side, make it shorter than our current width. And you'll notice as you go past this menu item, it starts to clip that content because it's outside of the frame. So just pick where you want it to be. I'm gonna pick like right there. You can pick wherever you want. So does it look like this for everyone or somewhat close? Cool. Now go back to the prototype section. And then now right underneath that position one, there's this overflow setting. With overflow where it says no scrolling, change that to horizontal. And so basically what this is saying is if there's any overflow content, any content that is outside of our frame, can we scroll to it, yes or no? And so if you have that frame selected, you go to prototype and you say overflow horizontal. That means that we can scroll horizontally to see more of our content. So now I'm gonna click on the menu title. I'm gonna click the preview button again. And then now I can click and drag and move and kind of simulate this kind of scrolling to view more stuff. So now just at a high level, some question that I get asked all the time is, do I have to prototype every interaction on the page? So do I have to prototype that you can click on Americano, for example, and it brings up an overlay that is like here. And then it has a description, and then it has these sizes, and I can pick whatever size, I can pick whatever milk, I can choose whatever add-ins, I can click add to cart, and then it's going to be in my cart. I have to be able to delete it and all of this stuff. No, that would take forever to prototype every single interaction that someone might take on your prototype. What prototypes are really meant to do is just show the functionality to stakeholders, whether those are project managers, other designers, those are developers. And so repetitive things like this, you don't need to do every single one of these, right? So I have one drink option, one food option, for example. I need to just probably prototype those out. With like user testing, you would be kind of guiding them a little bit to do it. So it wouldn't be just like add a drink item to your cart. It would be add a cold brew that's large and has oat milk. And then you only have to do that, but you still kind of let them loose and make sure that they can do it on their own. So that's actually animation and prototyping in a nutshell. There's not too much to it. There's a few other things, obviously. So like change location, for example, if you were to just click on interactions, there's these different triggers here. And for example, I could do while hovering, right? Now, while hovering under action, I can click change to, and then this is going to show my variants. So remember last week when we created components and variants, I have this whole group right here where I have a default button and then I have a use case as one property. So if I go back to design and I click here, you'll see that the use for this one is login and the state is default, where this use is register, this one is continue as guest, this one submit, and all of that stuff. Over here, this is where I'm changing the state. So from default to like hover, from hover to clicked or pressing or whatever you want to call it. And so now if I go to my change location, for example, with prototype, if it hovers over and I do change to, I can keep the use case as change location, but change my state to hover. And we'll just do it as an instant one. And so now if I go to my cart title and I click preview and I hover over my change location, it's changing the color. In reality, all that it's doing is it's changing which variant is showing on the screen, right? So I designed these variants to be kind of the default. What are you going to see when you're opening up this app or a website or stuff like that? I have one for when it's going to be hovered over. So what should it look like when someone's hovering over something? What should it look like when something's being clicked or being pressed on? And so then you can use those to prototype in between with those specific behaviors. So I could also add, for example, another interaction that is while pressing, change to clicked. And so when I do that and I preview this, when I hover over it, it shows my hover state of that green. It's a little hard to see at times in the prototype, but as you click on it, it'll change to this. The clicked one, I set it up so that it's like after it's clicked, it changes to that. Yeah.
Your default is like white right now, which is clicked, right?
Yeah. So sometimes when you click a bunch of times and you hover, it kind of gets a little funny. But if you click, I think I maybe, how did I do that? So typically you would have like the while you're pressing it, it would show like this. So there's a couple different ways that you can take a design and move it to code. So the first way is using Figma's dev mode. So if I click on dev mode right here, this is just basically meant for if instead of designers, we were developers, this is probably where things would be. So if I turn it on and I, let's say, click on where it says 2 items on my cart. Over here in dev resources, I will see some code and it will tell me which code makes up this styling right here. And so I can see our font family, I can see our font size, the font style, and all of that. You can switch between different types of code. So CSS is the web styling code. If you want to do an iOS code, you can pick one of those, or for Android. And then you'll also see that there's a couple different plugins as well. These ones might be a little bit more handy because they might be able to kind of package the HTML and show how it all works together. And so you can also find that by just right-clicking, go to plugins, and then do, look up code or something like that. Yeah, well, that's it for me. Thank you for coming and go make something cool.